What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Cody here alongside me, my friend from the horseshoehuddle.com. He's been putting in the work today. Drake Wally. Drake, thanks for joining me, man. How are you doing?
I am doing fantastic, and I appreciate you saying that. It has been a chaotic day, and it all came from Lamar Jackson's Twitter that started it all. So I'm happy to be here, and thank you so much for having me on. Bring the juice, man. Appreciate that.
Absolutely, man. Guys, go be sure to follow Drake right there at the @ sign at D Walster Drake. Go follow him. He's at like 600 some followers right now. Let's get that to 1,000. I think we can easily do that. But Drake does great work over there at Horseshoe Huddle. And so, Drake, you mentioned it, man. We'll just jump right into it, man. Lamar Jackson. I mean, there's been speculation. The Colts have been tied to Lamar Jackson and rumors and things like that, but nothing concrete, right? And we were talking off air right before we started. There's no way a few months ago either of us would have said Lamar Jackson is going to not be a Baltimore Raven. Like just all this stuff, but it's not just rumors anymore, Drake. It came from Lamar himself. He wants to be traded out of Baltimore. What is your reaction to just that and just what that means for the landscape of the AFC right now with Lamar Jackson potentially out of Baltimore?
Well, I mean, it means a lot of things. If you're looking at it from a Ravens fan standpoint, it kind of sucks because, you've known that's been the dynamic kind of quarterback. He's arguably still the most electrifying quarterback in the league. And so it's very shocking. I was not kind of like you, I was not expecting it. The rapport he had with the running back committees and Mark Andrews and John Harbaugh. I really didn't think that it would ever happen. I'm very surprised. But I think as far as the landscape, I mean, you got to think if hypothetically the Colts were to take Lamar Jackson or take that chance on him, I mean, outside of maybe the Jags, you're looking at potentially jumping right to the front of the discussion of favorites to win the division. That's how big of a difference maker Lamar Jackson is. But still, at the end of the day, Cody, I am shocked that he wants out of Baltimore.
Yeah, it's just crazy because like players don't do that, right? Players don't, first off represent themselves, right? They usually have agents, but Lamar's like, I'm representing myself, and good on him, man. He knows what he wants, but it's just something that's so we're not used to seeing. It's so unorthodox the way that Lamar has been taking this. And yeah, I mean, you just talk about the landscape of what that could do. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to want his services, but what it could do if you just hypothetically put him, on the Colts, man. You talk about the perfect fit for Shane Steichen in this system, and especially with previously, working with a very mobile quarterback in Jalen Hurts and what he was able to do. And you just think about like Lamar with what he's able to do with his legs, and also throwing former MVP a couple years ago, pairing alongside Jonathan Taylor, who was the rushing leader in 2021. Like, you just look at that pairing and you're just like, oh my goodness. Like, talk about a matchup nightmare for defenses if Lamar was to come to Indy. Man, what do you think he's going to provide or he would provide in this hypothetical scenario if the Colts were to trade for him? What would he provide in the Steichen offense? What are the ways you think Shane Steichen could use him and utilize his skill set to really like create these mismatches like he did with Jalen Hurts a year ago?
I mean, it would be very impressive because, kind of like you said, he has the ability to help a quarterback, by utilizing his strengths, and he molds the offense around their strengths. Something that's very interesting is, yeah, you arguably have the best offense Lamar Jackson's ever had. I mean, he's never had a pass catching room with the likes of a Michael Pittman Jr., an Alec Pierce, now an Isaiah McKenzie, who in all rights is probably a little bit of a shorter Hollywood Brown. He has the potential to do, something like that, or he's the open space type of guy. But man, the tight end really sticks out to me because you're looking at Shane Steichen, who was able to utilize Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz the way he did. And now you got a guy like Lamar Jackson, who had the rapport with Mark Andrews, and they destroyed NFL defenses the whole time he's been there. Man, Jelani Woods, that's what sticks out to me. I know that Jonathan Taylor's, the best running back that Lamar's ever had, if in this hypothetical sense this happens. But man, Jelani Woods and his athleticism, his sheer size, that's what I would love to see, is just what he would do with Lamar Jackson, who knows he loves to throw to the tight ends, and then Shane Steichen, who knows how to get those tight ends in the best positions to win.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you to everybody who's in this chat, nearly 150 of you. Be sure to smash that like button, subscribe, all that good stuff. Getting it out to more people, either fans of the Colts, people who are love football or just kind of monitoring this situation because it is obviously a huge deal in the AFC right now. You mentioned kind of the supporting cast that Lamar would have, right, with Indianapolis. Now, we'll say this, man. They have to play better than they did a year ago, right? I know we all know the Colts. Michael Pittman, he's a year removed from, having his best season as a pro, had kind of a down year last year. And then Alec Pierce is coming into year number 2. And obviously Jelani Woods is as well. And then there's always the potential, that the Colts could go in the draft and look to add another receiver in some way. So how do you kind of feel like this offense could really maybe give Lamar something? It's not like people are talking about the receivers, like they're like, it's not like the Bengals, or it's not like, insert team that has really good number 1, number 2 receivers, but the Colts have some solid guys and they're young, right? And so how do you think maybe Lamar can kind of build rapport with some of these young receivers, these guys that are in their early to mid 20s, and kind of how maybe that pairing right there, because Lamar's only 26, right? So how could they kind of grow together, and how could you see that being a scenario where it actually works out really well for this unit?
The best way to answer that is to do it this way. So the people that say, "Oh, well, the Colts they don't have a Tyreek Hill and a Jalen Waddle, or they don't have a Mike Williams and a Keenan Allen," they have a whole hell of a lot more than Lamar had. All right, that's all that matters in this situation. Is Lamar did not have the pass catchers. Rashad Bateman is the closest number 2 that he had, and that's just a guy that unfortunately couldn't stay healthy. Outside of Hollywood Brown, and I think the big ad at one point was Sammy Watkins. Like the Ravens made curious decisions with receivers. They didn't really seem to try as hard. I mean, they probably tried hard and just didn't hit the mark. But I think that, good Lord, you're talking about play action guys like Pierce and guys like Pittman. Pittman was a volume receiver last year, probably still be that, but got a guy like Alec Pearson, a 6'7" monster in Jelani Woods. Oh, wait, you also have Andrew Ogletree, who is equally a monster. And oh, wait, then you also potentially have Kylan Granson, who's more of the slot receiver of the tight end group. There's just a lot more. There would be a lot more around Lamar Jackson offensively. And I think that the Colts, with stability, can improve their blocking because they were doing better as the season went along. That gets missed a lot. That's one thing Jeff Saturday did well, is he got the offensive line kind of a fire lit underneath him. So I don't think that offensive line is as far off from an improvement as people think. And he'd be a good fit as a mobile quarterback if they had early season struggles.
Now, here's one of the big knocks, Drake, that people have on the potential of getting Lamar Jackson is the fact the last 2 seasons he's had some injuries that he struggled through. Right, he's missed good chunk of the games over the last 2 seasons, and obviously last year we all know didn't come back, and that was just kind of a big deal. But we talked about this a little bit before we jumped on here. Could Shane Steichen potentially be a really good thing for Lamar Jackson's longevity in the NFL, right? Because we know all about, Lamar Jackson's ability to run the football, but we also you look at all the quarterbacks that have kind of been built that way, that kind of are run-first quarterbacks. And Drake, that doesn't really seem like for long-term success. It hasn't been a successful thing because bodies break down, things happen. He's not running the same he did when he was first in the league, right? He's had some injuries. So how do you think maybe Shane Steichen, if this did happen, this marriage did happen, could maybe even make Lamar a better player?
I think that he would utilize him more as a passer and try to. Obviously, you want to use his legs. Someone that dynamic, you need to. But I think, one, he would use less of Lamar's legs and probably try to get him to improve those passing mechanics. Like I said, you've got more weapons this time. But I also do, like we discussed before the show started, we said, Shane Steichen would probably be very honest with him and say, look, I'm going to need you to take care of your body better because I'm going to use you to get a lot of big plays going. We're going to use your running ability to start play action and, suck those defensive secondaries in so we can hit big plays. There would be a lot of like, look, you need to come to a realization, Lamar, that you can't run around like you did in Baltimore because there are more weapons to throw to. So I think that he'd be probably throwing the ball just a little bit more, maybe sub 1,000 yards rushing.
Gotcha. And just that kind of stuff, right? It's like you substitute less running productivity for more longevity, right? And potentially, hopefully, playing a full 17 game season, right? That's obviously the goal. And Lamar's struggled in the last couple seasons for that to happen. So that's definitely one that I completely understand. People are kind of hesitant. They're like, man,
Oh
there's some
yeah.
durability concerns there. I totally get that. The other two, though, they kind of go hand in hand in terms of, it's pricey in terms of the contract you're going to have to give Lamar and also in terms of what you're going to have to give up, right? I mean, if the Colts were going to try to offer, right, have that offer sheet, it would be at least 2 first-round picks. Now, with Baltimore, and potentially trading Lamar, could they ask for even more, because there's going to be other teams that are wanting his services. Could it be, more than just two first-round picks? What are your thoughts on kind of the finances and what it'll cost in both those ways for the Colts to realistically have a chance at bringing Lamar to Indy?
I think that it's not even the picks because 2 first rounders. I mean, that's the most they can get out of it based off the players' agreement. So that I think that if you're getting a generational talent, that's not what the Colts would be upset with letting go of. I think they'd be upset with letting go of like the potential 4-year, $200 million contract. He wants a lot of it, if not all of it, I believe, guaranteed. And that's just not something I think that the Colts are going to want to do. It's a trend you're starting to see more of, and it does mess up your salary cap. So it's the money. I think the money would be a big, big deal. I think that's what's keeping him from doing it. Because two first round picks, I mean, you could probably swallow that if you're getting Lamar Jackson. But again, then you got to ask yourself, is it worth 10 games over the last 2 seasons of injuries? Like he's lost 10 games over the last 2 seasons out of a possible 34. He's played 24. So it's all on if they're going to put that money forward. And I just don't think they're going to be willing to fork over 50 million a year.
Yeah, it would definitely be a big swing and something we're
It'd be
not used to
big.
seeing Chris Ballard make. But it's interesting, Drake. I wanted to kind of go into Steichen, and Chris Ballard. They were both asked about Lamar, and we'll kind of get into more of what they had to say about that and other things here in a minute. But it's just interesting because I just get this really weird vibe. I don't know what it is, man. I can't really. This isn't really analysis. I just am like, this just feels like different. And I don't really understand what that means exactly, but I just feel like there's a lot of momentum and a lot of people that say Lamar to Indy, Lamar to Indy. It makes sense. It's just not something I'm necessarily used to, right? Like a superstar quarterback like this, a 26-year-old quarterback, the former MVP that's being linked to Indianapolis. It's just kind of uncharted territory a little bit as a Colts fan.
Well, we're all used to, everyone's used to hearing, 38-year-old, NFL legend is squeezing out those last couple years, or wild card prospect post injury is coming to the team because the offensive coordinator, or because the coach really believes he can fix him, or quarterback retires, backup quarterback thrust into starting role. Like that's what the Colts are. That's what Colts fans are used to hearing. But I'm telling you, I think that it's 2 things, and I think it's Irsay and Ballard. Irsay, you saw his reactions from last year when he hired Saturday. He was just frustrated. He was sick of it, looking for Band-Aid solutions. Ballard knows, look, Ballard's a very smart person. His seat is hot. All right. He cannot be conservative anymore. And you saw it by him signing Isaiah McKenzie, who has a lot of potential, but that's not a Ballard guy. He's 5'7". That's not somebody Ballard typically hires. So I think that Ballard realizes that his seat is hot. He needs to start taking some chances. So I think that with Lamar's tweet that he requested a trade, mixed with the fact they're not giving him the money in Baltimore, mixed with the fact that the Colts are so open at quarterback, Cody, like we said, we don't even know anymore. They could draft, they could sign, they could trade. I mean, they've got multiple ways they're going to fill that position. I think that's why you're seeing it. And it's very true. It is everywhere all of a sudden out of nowhere. It's the number one thing that's going to happen now.
Yeah, it's crazy. And even Zach Kiefer tweeted about it. He's like, I just get this feeling that the Colts are literally have all options open for a quarterback, including Lamar Jackson, which is just something that you don't see the Colts do, right? You just under Chris Ballard, you just haven't. And I've often thought this, Drake, and maybe, and I want to get your opinion on this. I felt like Chris Ballard, and he's never had it, so it really hasn't worked out. I've always felt like he's the type of GM that if he has a star quarterback, he can find ways, right? That's why he's got the label bargain bin Ballard from certain fans. It's because like he can find guys for very cheap that can fill key roles for this team, right? But the thing is, he just hasn't been aggressive where he's needed to be, and especially at the quarterback position. And when he has, it's been wrong, right? With a la Carson Wentz for one. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I've thought. Like, if you were to get Lamar, you probably have faith that Chris Ballard can find some guys like Isaiah Rodgers of the world, right? The guys in the 5th round that can contribute and can play some quality snaps for you. He just kind of, has always struck me as a GM that would do well if he could get the quarterback position like solved and figured out. Like, he can get a roster around that quarterback. His issue has just been getting the guy at quarterback. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with you 100%, Cody. I do actually like Ballard a lot as a GM, and you got to keep in mind he came in 2017. Luck was out the whole year. Okay, I mean, no Andrew Luck. You have, I think, Charlie Whitehurst, aka Football Jesus, and then you've got Jacoby Brissett. Though, yeah, Scott Tolzien,
-5
and
yards.
yeah, and then you've got I think you have Andrew Luck 1 year, and of course you make the playoffs. Look at that, and you even get to the divisional round, and then after that you just stumble and fall apart. So it really hasn't been all Ballard's fault. It can't be easy replacing a generational talent that just retires. I just want to say that. But I do think that he is looking at his job like, I've got to act now. I've got to do something now, whether that's taking Anthony Richardson or Will Levis, or, if somehow they do get a Bryce Young or a CJ Stroud, while I do think it's the first two in the draft, now there's a chance that he might take a swing at Lamar Jackson to save his job. It's a job. He's trying to perform well. And he's got his back against the wall. He's going into his 7th year. You've made the playoffs, I think,
twice, right?
Okay, twice lost, or you've won one game in 6 years as GM. So you got to do something. I wouldn't put it out of the question that a Lamar, acquisition does happen. So.
Yeah, well, we can kind of talk about, because Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen both took the podium today at the owners' meeting. So we can kind of talk about that a little bit, about what their comments were. Steichen was asked about Lamar Jackson, and he said, Shane Steichen, he's already gotten good at the coach speak, where he kind of doesn't answer the questions and stuff like that. And, or he kind of like, says a very general thing, how coaches do it, kind of very Frank Reich-esque in that way. But he was asked about Lamar, and he said, we're going to do our due diligence on every player, whether it's in free agency or in the draft. And I just thought that was interesting, that he's not shutting down the rumors at all, right? There's some teams that have been like, no, we're going to draft a guy, or no, we're not interested in Lamar, or whatever. I didn't get that vibe from Shane Steichen. What are your thoughts on kind of what his comments were?
He like you said, man, he's got that whole, emotionless, just blank answering down pat already. He's going to do great. No one's going to know what he's thinking. I think that he deep down knows that he could win with Lamar. I think that is a very real, a real thought in his head. But at the end of the day, it's also, the Colts are in a weird position because they have a brand new coach that has a lot of say in the quarterback. It's not like Arizona with Jonathan Gannon. I'm not saying he doesn't have say, like if they were in the position to get a quarterback, but you're talking about an offensive mind that has developed these guys from the ground up. And in Rivers' case, he was a veteran still getting worked on by Steichen. So this is a guy that wants to develop whoever he's got, and he's going to have a lot of say in that position. Now, I do think that with how much it's open for the Colts, whether they could trade to get Lamar, they could draft any one of the 5 big guys. You don't want to also tip your hand. So you don't want to say, you know what, we haven't even considered Lamar, because that's telling everybody, hey, draft, that we're going to be picking in the draft. It could be a sign that Ballard is just like saying, oh yeah, no, you got to take a look at these kind of guys, because you can't let a talent like that pass you up just to throw a smoke screen out there and fool the people that are trying to see what their next move is. So it's smoke screen season. I've seen that tweet and that hashtag, and it truly is. So
tell you what, man, you have no idea like what they're thinking, where they're at. You're like, 1 second you're like, oh, they're definitely going to trade for Lamar. Oh no, they're definitely going to draft Anthony Richardson. It just, you don't know with some of these. So it's definitely just interesting. And it's just that where you just don't believe anything right now, right? I'll believe it when I see it. It's kind of where I'm at when it comes to that. One thing that Steichen also talked about as well, he said that they want to add some more pieces, the Colts do, on the offensive line, right? We all know how important that unit is and how much they struggled last year at certain points in the season. And the Colts haven't added anybody right now on their offensive line. Chris Ballard also said the Colts are going to bring back Ryan Kelly and Kenny Moore. So you at least have your starting center back for Indianapolis. But the Colts do probably want to add at right guard. I think that's kind of been the position that we've thought about. There's a couple names still out there. Who are some guys maybe that, as you hear that, maybe some guys that you think could add to the competition on this offensive line that are still out there in free agency in your mind?
Oh man, there's a center that played for the Jets that used to or he plays for the Jets and he used to play guard. His name's Connor McGovern.
Hmm.
That could be somebody that, I mean, if he did find his way out of a starting position, he might be looking to try to get a shot at right guard and might look at the Colts like, hey, the Colts might look at him like this guy could push Will Fries. I think it's going to be all on Will Fries. I think they're buying into Raymond. They might like draft somebody in the day 3 to push Raymond, or maybe they'll sign a tackle. But either him or Gabe Jackson from the Seahawks. I think he's like 32. He was cut by the Seahawks. He's a longtime starter. You want someone to push Will Fries, who's young and wants to get and keep that starting position. Give it to a guy who was a veteran of the NFL. He was just cut from his position, and he's being asked to go prove he can start. I think that's a perfect signing. That'd be perfect for me, because then you're either going to get a finished product in the veteran offensive lineman that's going to start at right guard, or you're going to get Will Fries, who's pushed himself to earn that position.
Yeah. Well, he did also talk about, he raved about offensive line coach Tony Sperano Jr. He said that they had about 5 or 6 guys that he brought in, and typical Colts this offseason, they had very long interviews, 6-hour interviews, he said. And he said Sperano just blew him away with some of the things that he was saying. And I know there were some people when the Colts announced that hiring that were like, oh man, this guy's like, their third choice or whatever, right? But it definitely seems like Steichen had his options of guys, and he just chose the guy that he felt like was the best at the job, and he felt like was going to do the best job. What are your thoughts on that? Because I feel like the Sperano thing, it kind of flew under the radar. There's certain people who didn't really love that move.
I can understand why people didn't love it because of 2 reasons. One, if you look at his record and the teams that he's been the assistant offensive line coach on, they haven't had the best, I guess, of numbers. But he did have the Jacksonville Jaguars when they had Blake Bortles, which, no offense, he was not a starting quarterback, and they almost got to the Super Bowl with that running attack. And Leonard Fournette, who also is not a starting running back anymore, I don't believe. So there's a reason to look at a guy like that and say, okay. I do think also the other reason is because everyone preemptively had Roy Estvan as the guy. That's who Steichen is hiring. But Nick Sirianni does have to hold on to some guys. You can't let Steichen take them all. So I wasn't as surprised. I do think that it's an interesting hire, and it's just going to be one of those things where it's the first time he's getting his own offensive line. He comes from football family. His father was a head coach. So, I mean, and he was a fiery dude, fiery, very in your face, ready to win. So I think if there's one guy who could push that offensive line, get them back to where they used to be, it's probably Tony Sperano Jr.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you to the over 220 people in the chat right now. Really appreciate it. Be sure to hit that like button. Be sure to subscribe, all that good stuff. I think right now we're about 50 likes. Let's get that up to over 100, if you would please. Thank you so much. Drake, we already mentioned it, but the Colts announced they are bringing back center Ryan Kelly and cornerback Kenny Moore. So the Colts will have two of their starting corners from last year back with Indianapolis. It was reported actually by one of your colleagues, Shad McGinnis, who talked about how the Colts are looking to add, which they talked about today, interior offensive line help, and then also at cornerback, right? And there's a lot of corners out there right now. Obviously, we know Rocky Sin, who was with the Colts, he was a draft pick in 2019. It was with the Colts up until last season. And then you have other guys like Shaquille Griffin still out there. What are your thoughts maybe on the corner position a little bit, and maybe some names that interest you, knowing that Kenny Moore's coming back, you can, kind of write off slot a little bit. Is there another name that potentially interests you as maybe one of those outside corners?
I really like the idea of Shaquille Griffin. coming to the Colts. I don't think the Rocky Sin one's realistic just because on his way out, he wasn't the happiest with the organization. Now, there have been reunions in the past, but I think the best shot at signing somebody is Shaquille Griffin. I do think that yes, it's big that you kept Ryan Kelly, but it's even more so important that you kept Kenny Moore because that was a depleted and very thin cornerback group. And even though Isaiah Rodgers Sr. in all right, and if he's hearing this, in all right, deserves more snap counts. I don't know if he's at the role or at the experience level yet to be the number one guy, but should be starting. But man, you're looking at then it's like Dallas Flowers after the Stephon Gilmore trade. So the fact that Kenny Moore is huge. I do think, and this is my colleague Andrew Moore mentioned this, and it's because he played cornerback at the end of the season last year. Julian Blackman could also be playing cornerback because you're talking about Rodney Thomas, 7th-round pick, out of nowhere, no big deal. He just leads the team in interceptions. The guy can seriously start. You want Nick Cross to hit his stride. You might as well start him at the other safety. I'm telling you, don't be surprised if you see Julian Blackman maybe play a little bit of cornerback. So, but man, that Shaquille Griffin signing, if that happened, that would be great. And please do it.
Marcus Peters, I know, is another name that people threw out there as
Oh, yeah.
well. I would probably go Shaquille Griffin just because he's a little bit younger and there is still some potential upside. And he has, I think recently, I know with Jacksonville, it was kind of a dud and there was not, he signed that big deal and nothing really came of it. But I felt like he had some nice moments in the past. So I think it would be a good fit for Indy's defense, kind of the kind of corner I think that they're looking for out there. Obviously, it's not going to be Stephon Gilmore type of corner, right? Nobody really is that's out there, but I do think that it'd be a really solid option for the Colts. And I still do think, honestly, Drake, I know the Colts have added wide receiver and they'll probably add another corner. I still do think I look at those outside of quarterback as the top two needs on the Colts right now. What are your thoughts on kind of that and maybe how that could, obviously, depending on Lamar in that situation, but how could the Colts maybe look to add more needs, more of those two needs here in the draft?
I think that the Colts are going to get, if I had to make actual predictions, it's Jonathan Mingo from Ole Miss. I think that he is 6'2". He is 220 pounds of pure anger, and he is a slot receiver. Ballard all over it. That's got a Ballard all over it pick. And then there's Andre Iosavas from Princeton. Now, the reason that I say his name is because I watched him at the combine. He is like 6'5", ran a 4.3 40, and he is willing to block. Those things right there, they've missed blocking at wide receiver since Zach Pascal, and they need it because people don't talk about receivers blocking often. You watch those plays from Jonathan Taylor in 2021. Yes, the offensive line had domination at the point of attack, but then you had Doyle hitting the linebackers, and then you had Pascal hitting the secondary, and that wall laid out. And those last two pieces are what breaks loose the run because otherwise Taylor's got to do it on his own. So, I mean, you have blocking at tight end and receiver, you really make it an issue. And if you put Lamar in that, oh my goodness. Like, I think that the Colts are going to draft a slot receiver that can do something with the football, and they're going to get an outside guy that is a blocker that's willing to, maybe get his nose a little bloody.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. The Colts desperately missed that last year when Jack Doyle retired and then Zach Pascal went out to Philly. So I definitely think they need somebody kind of that, and maybe a guy that can kind of be that tone setter in that wide receiver room. That's what Pascal was for the Colts for years. He wasn't necessarily ever a high catch guy, volume guy, but he was always consistent. Same with Jack Doyle, just guys that are kind of glue guys that you don't really realize you miss them until they're gone. And so definitely think, that would be something. You mentioned tight end. I think the Colts need to look into getting a blocking tight end of some sort, kind of to be that, third or fourth tight end, depending what happens with Mo or with Ogletree as well. But yeah, it'll be definitely interesting to see how that all happens. I already briefly mentioned Chris Ballard talking about Lamar, going back to that real fast. I wanted to read his quote that he had said today in front of the media. He said, anytime a special player is available, which he is, talking about Lamar, you got to do the work. I'm not going to get into deep discussions on where it's at, what we're doing, what we might do, but he's a real special player. You never know how it'll work out. So you mentioned it earlier, Drake, like, could it be a smoke screen? I don't know. But rarely do you hear, I think, Chris Ballard be that open, right, about that stuff, right? Chris Ballard, I don't necessarily view as a guy that's going to try to mislead people. He's pretty open, to be completely honest. Like, he's pretty honest about things in a lot of ways. So, like, how do you look at that, knowing Chris Ballard, knowing what he said in the past? How do you kind of view that comment, those comments that he made to the media?
Oh man. Actually, before I get to that, there's somebody I forgot to mention, like that I think would do fantastic with Lamar, and that will anyway, is Isaiah McKenzie. I think that addition, I think Steichen had something to do with that. I think you're going to see Isaiah McKenzie really perform well at the slot position. Um, as far as Ballard, obviously you can't not address how freaking dynamic Lamar Jackson is. Do you have a more dynamic quarterback in the NFL, running and passing combined? You don't. You just don't. Like, I know Mahomes won a Super Bowl. I know Jalen Hurts is a very athletic quarterback, but there is no gazelle out there that commands an offense like Lamar. Maybe Anthony Richardson, but we don't know that yet. So I think that he can't ignore that, but I also think Chris Ballard is orchestrating, and this is just a hot take, but I think he's orchestrating a smoke screen of masterclass proportions, because he walked into Andrew Luck. Okay. He's never had to draft a quarterback like this. He's trusted Frank Reich, and that didn't pan out. It's so open that he could draft one of 5 non-generational talents or grab Lamar Jackson, and he's already got arguably the best insurance policy. So it's like, if I'm Chris Ballard, I'm doing exactly what he's doing, and I'm saying, "Oh yeah, Lamar, great," but I'm sticking with the draft. That's just me. But again, smokescreen season. It could also, as easily as it could be fake, Cody, and just a tactic, it could be totally real, but no one knows it because they're thinking, is Chris Ballard too busy thinking, is he being serious? Or by the time you make that decision, the news breaks that Lamar Jackson's an Indianapolis Colt.
Now,
So
could you see a scenario if, say the Colts, I know there's been some like rumors and stuff floating around about, could the Colts trade down? Like, could you see a scenario where the Colts trade down? I don't know how far they would trade down, but they trade down, they get some more draft capital, and then they use that capital, right? And they use that first round pick, and then whatever else it takes in future years, but they still have enough where they feel like they can still add, and maybe even grab. I don't know if they would grab a quarterback because you have Minshew, but you know what I mean? Like, they could add some more pieces, and it's not like you're giving away 4, maybe you're giving away like 8 or 9 or something like that. Like, do you see that being a scenario, or do you think it would take 4 and some other things?
you're saying like a scenario where they go back?
They go back and then they trade that pick
Oh
in a
goodness.
package for Lamar. That's been something people have floated around, and I've been like, that's interesting. I never really have thought about it much.
I think that that would be definitely. I mean, obviously, you don't know what the first 3 teams are going to do, or if you trade to 3, or I mean, in that case, I think they'd stay. But that would have to be pre-planned. I do think that if they stay at 4 and the guy that they want is not there, I absolutely do not put it past. I know no one wants to hear this stuff, okay, but I do not put it past Ballard to say, yeah, no, yeah, we're trading back. And then who knows, you might see Lamar still there, and you have a pick that has been traded for Lamar. I mean, it's happened at the draft where that kind of stuff has gone down. AJ Brown got traded at the draft. Okay, Marquise Brown got traded at the draft. I mean, this stuff happens. Don't put it past it to happen with a quarterback. So I don't. Oh man, I think that right now you mix the fact that the Colts. It's 2 things that make this big concoction of explosive news. Is that Ballard is on the hot seat, and there's so many ways this quarterback this quarterback position can be filled. You mix those 2 things together, who the heck knows what's going to happen? So
It's unfortunate. Like, I wish we could say for sure this is happening. This is happening. This is who the Colts are getting. I don't even think the Colts know yet, based off of
they
what
don't know.
Steichen was saying, where he's like, yeah, nobody's really like separated themselves yet. Like, and then could that be a smokescreen? Could they have their guy? And Steichen's not obviously going to tell the media that, but like, could they have their guy? Or maybe do they feel like, all these guys, they're nothing special. So maybe we go get a guy who is special in Lamar. Like, but also they could have their guy. So it's just, yeah, you're right. There's a lot of smoke screens, a lot of questions. The good news is it's almost over. We're about a month away from the draft. So we'll know a lot more there. Thank goodness, because I can't handle much more quarterback talk and the people just arguing in the comments, blah, blah, blah. It's just you see it, you understand. It's just crazy. People have very hot takes and people agree, people disagree. It's just, I'm just going to sit back and watch what happens, man, and then analyze from there. But I think I've just come to this point, Drake, where I'm like, man, whoever you get, as long as you get an upgraded quarterback, which I think you automatically will, I'm going to be happy. I'm going to root for the guy, and I'm going to hope that he succeeds, whether it's a rookie, whether it's Lamar, whether it's somebody else. I don't know. But I'm going to make sure that I do that and, do the best that I can. And I guess we'll see, man. It's going to be very interesting nonetheless.
Well, and it's all kind of spiraled out of control since Carolina. Go ahead and blame Carolina for starting all this madness. Everything was fine. The Colts were going to get, either CJ Stroud or Bryce Young, and then, of course, I'm an Anthony Richardson guy. But ever since the Carolina trade, now you're like, well, Young and there's no way they're getting Young or Stroud. They're getting Richardson or Levis, and now you're like, well, there's no way they're getting anybody because they're going to go get Lamar. So it's like at this point, it's just, if you're a Colts fan and you're stressed out and you're watching the show, do what me and Cody are doing and just sit back and just wait until you get a confirmation on who the next quarterback is and just enjoy the ride. So
it's going to be interesting, man. But you know what? We have seen a crap ton in the last year, so we can handle it, Colts Nation. I think we've been broken down enough to be able to be stronger now and to be able to handle whatever does come at the quarterback position. And the good thing is the Colts are going to get an upgrade one way or another. Heck, Gardner Minshew will be an upgrade for what
already there.
So, I mean, the fact that both their quarterbacks on the roster are going to be upgrades and going to have more upside than what their passing game did last year should be enough to get Colts fans excited. So, Drake, thanks so much, man, for coming on. Really appreciate it. It's always a good time.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell the folks where they can find you, on Twitter, obviously, social media, and also your work over at Horseshoe Huddle?
It's you can go to @Colts on FN, which is Fan Nation. That's where all of our work is at. Horseshoe Huddle is me and Andrew Moore's podcast. Find a lot of cool stuff on if you just Google Horseshoe Huddle, you'll find all the articles there. But been working on a lot of breaking news pieces, stuff that's pretty hard to keep up with at times because today was for some reason just a storm of information. But yeah, go find me there and at the Walster Drake.
Awesome. Guys, go do that. Be sure to check him out and all the stuff they do over there at horseshoehuddle.com. They do great stuff over there, great work. And thank you guys, everybody who did interact in this video, whether you did it live, whether you watched it after the fact. Be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, all that good stuff so you can, and also put on the notifications so you can get notified when we do drop more content like this. And we have awesome guests like Drake on, and we're able to talk some ball here. But appreciate you, Drake, as always, man. We'll see you next time.
Hey, man. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Appreciate you guys, too, for tuning in. Really appreciate it. And as always, guys, go Colts.